Virginia. So let me ask you this. On the way the Big 12 is played, what do you think? We saw what West Virginia, Oklahoma was like fighting, right? It was like a turf war. Same thing with Baylor and Oklahoma State. Is that what we also expect? Cole asked us for predictions today. I said 20-16 Baylor. I don't know if the game goes much above that. If it gets into a shootout, I'll be surprised.
I think I said 23-17. I think this is a conference that most of the games are going to be like that. I think 37-31 Oklahoma and Kansas State last week was going to be, it's a high-scoring game by Big 12 standards now. I think most games are going to be very close, within 6-7 points of each other most of the time, and come down to a score or maybe 10 points. I don't think they're going to see a lot of the Texas Tech games. I think that's going to be few and far between. I think Oklahoma and Texas this week will be probably a pretty strong indicator on the high end of that, but most of the games will be on the low end like Baylor and West Virginia should be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm expecting competitive games. I don't think there's anybody that's shown that they're that much better than anybody at this point. I mean, if you've seen them, tell me, because everybody looks pretty even to me, and that's why the deeper we get, the more fun it is to see who actually separates themselves. I mean, Oklahoma, they win this weekend, then they remain the odds-on favorite and will have a couple of the major tests behind them. Kansas State's been a bugaboo. They'll have already taken care of them. Texas, it's always a wild game, and UT's actually got real confidence this time, not the fake stuff that Tom Herman, would kind of pump his chest about, not the wins here and all of a sudden they're back in the top 25. No, they're actually winning games and doing it in a manner that means that they, could be on their way actually back this time and not just some sort of joke line that we make fun of over the last few years. So I'm fascinated by OU Texas this weekend. I really do think it could go either way. I don't think there will be one team that wins big, but maybe that happens. I mean, it's a crapshoot. I'm fascinated by this game, and I think all the games this weekend, outside of whoever, plays Kansas throughout the rest of the few weeks, I think all the games will be close. Yeah, I mean, that's what we've seen so far.
Yeah, it's fun. It used to be the games would be close, but they'd be 50-45, and it would be, this way you get kind of a rhyme and a reason of what is going on, and we've seen Texas score 70 in a game against Texas Tech, but other than that, most of the games have been 31-29. Is that right? Baylor and Iowa State. The Oklahoma State won by, 11 or so against Kansas State. Most of the games have been what I would consider more old school of what is going on. Does this game, other than the obvious, if somebody muffs a punt, if you have a block punt or somebody runs, there's going to be turnovers that happen. Does this come down to something as simple? 254-339-1122. The chat room's going crazy. The text line's open, so are the phone calls. And obviously want to get into Iowa and Penn State. We'll do that with a writer that covers Iowa here momentarily. Just come down to West Virginia has not been able to run the ball. If they do, they win. And Baylor has not been able to stop the run. So if they somehow contain the running game, do they win?
Yes. I mean, if they can contain Letty Brown and force Jarrett Dagey to throw, I mean, he hadn't beat anybody throwing yet.
I disagree. I think that Jarrett Dagey nearly won that game throwing last week. I mean, that was how they nearly came back, was they were down 17-0, and he threw them into that game with probably some have said his best performance as a Mountaineer, one of his best performances as a Mountaineer. Barring Baylor being the first team to allow West Virginia to really run the football since Virginia Tech, because that was the last time Letty Brown had a big game. That was, 3-4 weeks ago? They haven't been able to run since, outside of Garrett Green on occasion. I'd imagine we'll see a lot of Garrett Green this weekend, but it's Jarrett Dagey throwing the football, unless Baylor has just suddenly forgot how to play defense. If they go out there and Letty Brown runs for 200 yards, then yeah, they're in trouble, but I wouldn't expect that to happen because this is a good defense, and everybody else has been able to stop him for the most part. So West Virginia's going to try to run the football, but I think you have to force Dagey into being the one that beats you or doesn't beat you. And if he's on and he plays like he did in the second half last week, then you might be in trouble. But if he's the guy who played in the first half last week, well, then you're probably good. So I think this game comes down to Baylor's offense is what it comes down to. I think the defense is going to be able to, at least keep it within reason. But if Baylor's offense goes out there and they can't run the football, and that leads them into having to force the pass, and that's something that they didn't do very well last week, then I think they'll be in trouble. I think it's a game where, to me, Gary Bohannon has to play his best game as a Baylor Bear, and he has to do it throwing the football. And they have to obviously find a way to run the football, but they're going to have to throw, and he's going to have to connect, and receivers are going to have to catch the ball. If Baylor can get a passing game, they should win this game. If they can't get a passing game, That's exactly what West Virginia would want teed up, and that would work in their favor.
All right, Texas and Oklahoma, obviously another game, a huge game for many reasons. One, because Texas has won 2 in a row, looked good doing it. Oklahoma has been able to grind out wins and looked a little more, I guess, in flow, although they couldn't do much to stop Kansas State on 3rd and 4th downs. But you look up, they're undefeated. It's interesting when you're undefeated and yet people are picking at you. You'd rather be undefeated and people going, hey, what's going on here? So we'll take your thoughts and comments on that as well. Texas and Oklahoma and why at 254-339-1122 from Owen. This was from Owen on West Virginia. Let's see, where did it go? Here it goes. He goes, Daigie's the reason West Virginia was in a hole that they were in, and he's right. And then also Daniel, I think it will be higher scoring. Maybe Daigie does get loose. It will be interesting. I think it's 31-27 Baylor from Daniel.
Yeah, he had the interception and then the strip sack fumble, and it was 17-0 early. And then the final score, Texas Tech had 20 points. So you gave up 17 points, like pretty much right away off of 2 crucial mistakes, and then you pretty much held them after that. And you were able to fight your way back into that game in large part because Jarret Doege was throwing the ball better than he has pretty much ever. So, again, I used the Spencer Sanders comparison yesterday. It's like that. It's like he's going to probably give you some opportunities like Spencer Sanders did last week. Spencer Sanders gave you 3 interceptions. You scored 0 points off. You scored 0 off 3 interceptions.
Not only that, Craig, not only did you not score if you're Baylor, but those were interceptions. A couple of them were, I think, down inside the red zone, where it also keeps them off the board.
Yeah, you're already in West Virginia territory. You're knocking on the door of West Virginia territory, basically. So, yeah, I mean, if Jarret Doege throws 3 interceptions, but you don't score, then that's on Baylor. I mean, that's to me, it's them having to take advantage of opportunities. But, you know, who knows what version of him shows up? It could be the first half, could be the second half. What version of Gary Bohannon shows up? Because honestly,
is it the
guys,
first half against Iowa State or the last 3 quarters?
They haven't played well offensively consistently. Like, people point to the second half last week. That was 2 drives. Like, don't give me that, oh, the offense played well in the second. They played okay. They played okay in comparison to the way they played terribly in the first half, but you know, stringing together 2 whole drives out of the entire game is not going to get it done this weekend.
And let's not talk about a whole. I mean, I know it's part of a drive, but the first touchdown was Abram Smith breaking a long run.
Yeah, you know, on a 4th and 1, right?
It wasn't what they have been doing of long sustained punishing drives. Since the second half of the Iowa State game, they haven't really moved the ball consistently. The first half of the Iowa State game was Gary Bohannon's opus. It was unbelievable.
I thought the first half of the Iowa State game, I was like, again, we know how good Iowa State is. I was like, my gosh, they were throwing not a perfect game, but they were dialing up one hell of a game plan against the Cyclones, and then they tightened it up, and Baylor did not react to it very well. Here is Caden. West Virginia did not win on the road last year, and so far this year they haven't won on the road either. And they're, of course, on the road on Saturday, 11 o'clock at McLean Stadium.
It's interesting that we're already, 5 weeks into the season, and TCU's just now having their first home game of the year, heading out to Lubbock. I believe that's correct.
Road game.
What did I say? Home game?
Yeah.
Road game of the year, whatever, heading out to Lubbock. Texas, we know, doesn't travel very much at all on their schedule. Like, they think they leave Texas twice or whatever the entire time. So, yeah, these schedules are about to ramp up and get interesting. We'll start to see, who's been solid at home, who's better on the road. But for West Virginia, you know, there's a lot of questions, and you have that defense to rely on. I mean, that's going to be a tough challenge for this Baylor offense. I mean, like I say, yesterday, you played Iowa State, Oklahoma State, and West Virginia. Those 3 defenses back to back to back. That's part of why your offense is struggling, because all 3 of those defenses are really good. And hopefully they've learned some lessons the last couple of weeks, because it wouldn't surprise me one iota to see West Virginia line up this week. And guess what? Those safeties are going to be up, waiting. They're going to be crashing down. They're going to be getting into the backfield, and Baylor hadn't handled that very well. It's going to be a slightly different look than what Iowa State and Oklahoma State did, but both those teams showed some flaws in the Baylor offense and where they have not been able to overcome or get around some of those looks. So I'd expect that West Virginia defense to just be chomping at the bit.
Treston Ebner, Paul, had no yards rushing.
Nope.
He did not really have any kind of a big play, not even in the passing game, and, of course, the return game, which helped them beat Iowa State. R.J. Sneed did not catch a pass. Taekwon had 3 catches, 52 yards, which is a nice average at 17 yards a pop.
But they missed him
But
deep.
they also missed
play.
some of those opportunities. I think they must find a way, not that that now Estrada can't make a play or Abram Smith. They have to get one of those 3 something. They have to get them going. And I'm talking about not just involved. I'm talking about they have to hit something big. Some of the predictions that Oklahoma and Texas split down the middle. One's 42-31.
I will say
another one's Oklahoma 34-28 from Sooner JJ. They hold Bijan under 150 all-purpose yards and force Thompson to beat them.
Yeah, I want to get back to those and what people are saying, but one thing on West Virginia is if Letty Brown does run the ball effectively, that spells doom for Baylor this weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. And back to that, I think they need to get diverse with their playmaking. They need to get aggressive in the passing game. They're not really. They're not at all. Yeah. I mean, outside of a play here and there, they need to, I think maybe even early have a possession where you're aggressive in the passing game.
Yeah, they need to be mindful of Garrett Green. I mean, I think Neil Brown at any point could really, kind of throw a curveball. Garrett Green's been appearing sporadically and, even, got a drive last week and all that. And he's clearly their running threat, their biggest running threat, even bigger than Letty Brown is at this point because, they're just able to block better for Green running it from the quarterback spot than they are with Brown from the typical running back spot. But, yeah, Baylor defense is going to have to be mindful of Green back there when he does come into the game, however often he does, because he does give them a different wrinkle, a different look offensively, and he is capable of running the football really well. So that's something that's hurt them at times as well, is not being able to contain guys. So I'm sure they'll see a mix, but the worst formula for them would be West Virginia suddenly finding a running game with Letty Brown, Jarrett Dagey throwing like he did in the second half last week, and Garrett Green getting yards on the ground.
Well,
that would be like the absolute worst formula for Baylor this weekend defensively.
Building speed.